Hi all, I'm Colette here today from Witchways, and today I want to share a little bit about spirits that can be protective or maybe even guardian spirits for those of you who are beginner witches or have just a little bit of experience. I hope you enjoy. So there are all kinds of protective spirits, and some of them can be worked with by anyone, people who are just starting out, and others need to be worked with people who have been practicing longer and have more psychic, intuitive skills and a bit more magical discernment. I think the thing that makes a spirit more or less advanced to work with is the kind of spirit you call on. Guardians and protector spirits can work with us to help ward off danger from other spirits. They can accompany us on trance journeys or in dream work, and they can also let us know when dangers are appearing in the human world. Usually they do this by showing up physically or an image of them appearing in your mind, and you aren't quite able to get that image out of your mind, and you might also just feel them around you. So working as a beginner with protective spirits, I would probably start with plant spirits like trees, animal spirits, or maybe saints. Let's jump in by starting to talk about working with animal spirits as a protector or as a guardian spirit. Animal spirits are some of the easiest to work with if you're a beginner witch or just have like a year or so of experience. And that's because most of us have an affinity of some sort with some kind of animal. And maybe that's one that we liked a lot and wished maybe that we were when we were a child. Or maybe it's one that we wished we had when we were a child and we would imagine that we had them. Or maybe it's an animal that actually lived and was a beloved animal companion who's now passed over and are willing to be our protectors. The first step is to see if any of them want to be helpful, and there are lots of ways to do that. And you can start this by just letting an image of each of these animals float across your mind, just spending a minute with each of them, and then notice if you have any kind of feeling of like or connection or something like that as you sit with each animal. And if that's the case, just make a note of it and go on to the next one. Once you've figured out which animals you have an affinity for, the next step is to just take a minute to think about if they feel protective to you. You might also do some research online and see if any of the animals that you have an affinity for have protective associations. Once you have a list of animals that you both have an affinity for and have some protective qualities, you want to kind of narrow that list down a little bit if you haven't already to maybe one or two, and see if they are willing to be a guardian and if that feels right for you as well. And there's lots of ways to do that. The first way is that if you are emotionally sensitive or empathic, you could just call an image or picture of one of the animals into your mind and sit with it, and then imagine floating a question out to them of, are you possibly willing to work with me as a protector or guardian? And you might get a response, and this could feel like a warming sensation in your heart or your gut. Or if you are someone who gets information through words, you might hear a yes or a no. You might feel a sensation of welcoming or a sensation of repulsion from the animal, and that could be a yes/no answer. If you're someone that overthinks things, that is fine, because there are other options in order to get those kinds of answers. So one of the things that you can do is get a pendulum and learn how to use it, get really good at getting just basic yes and no answers. And the other option might be pulling a card for each animal. And a yes answer in a card might be a card that has protection associated with it in the image, or a card that has a positive outcome associated with it. If you still need to narrow it down a little further, you can use your pendulum or pull some cards and ask some very specific questions. So the first question might be something like, would this protector be beneficial to me? And the second question might be something like, Would this protector relationship be beneficial to the animal? And the third question might be something like, would this spirit be able to be protective in all situations or just in particular situations? Your next step before you make any kind of formal commitment to an animal that you want to have as a protector or guardian is to build a reciprocal relationship. And one way to do that is, I think it's important to give very regular offerings, and you can do some research on things that you like, put it on a plate or on your altar. I think water is always a good offering, especially if you're making offerings really frequently. Over time, you might have intuitions or dreams about what kinds of things that they like, and go ahead and follow up on that even if you're not sure, because over time you'll get a stronger sense of what they like and what they don't. If they are an animal that I am likely to see in my everyday life or when I'm out in the woods, I offer them a simple blessing when I physically see them. For me, this looks like saying something very simple like, may you and your family survive and thrive. Another thing you can do to build relationship is to donate money to a specific group that does support for particular types of animals. And as you send that money off, you can say something like, may this money pave the way for many others to donate to this group as well. Once you've developed a relationship, and if you feel good about it, you can ask them magically to be a protector or guardian for you. They don't have to be a protector forever. In fact, it's probably really good to just kind of check in once a year and see if the spirits that you are currently working with are still right for you. If you've been developing a relationship with them for a while, they may already be doing some protective work for you, but I always like to make it sort of magically official, so to speak. So to do that, pick a full moon, or you can just do it anytime during a waxing moon, and do whatever you normally do to start a ritual, like maybe cast a circle or call in beings, whatever you do. Then I would set up an altar for that animal, and on that altar I would place images of that animal, or I would place representations like fur, bone, and feathers from that animal. Place a bowl of water and a plate of food that they may like on the altar as well. Do your best to feel or visualize yourself committing and supporting to them and them protecting you. Hold that in your mind or in your body as you continue on, and then imagine that feeling or that image flowing down your arms, in your hand, and out onto the altar, onto the plate of things they like and the bowl of water. Then light a candle. Let your candle burn all the way out, or snuff it when the ritual feels done. Then put the water and the offerings outside on the earth. You can relight that candle the first few times. You call that animal into your circle as a protector and work to continue building your relationship as long as you're working with that animal. Plant spirits can also be protectors, and they do a lot of things for us. I feel like the easiest plants to work with if you're looking for a guardian or protector spirit are trees, because trees are strongly protective. Some trees are strongly associated with protection, like some of the larger ones like beech, oak, pine, walnut, and a lot of the evergreens, but any tree that you have an affinity with is going to be helpful. To find the guardian tree that's right for you, you could go through a similar process as what I described before with the animal spirits, but you could also just go and sit with them in the arboretum or in nature and do a simpler process. Try to find a place in nature where you can sit with your back leaned up against the trunk of a tree, or you can sit very close to it, touching it if you want. Then just start to quiet yourself, center yourself, and offer the tree your out-breath. I've talked about this before in videos. It's the idea of just breathing your breath out and consciously imagine and seeing that tree taking your out breath in. And then when you breathe in, imagine and feel the actual oxygen that the tree is creating for you, and let that move into your body. And then just take a few more breaths, noticing what you feel. Then go through asking them if they might want to be your ally using some of the techniques I mentioned before, or just creating a few simple questions of your own. Again, spend some time making offerings to them with your breath. Even if you're not in their presence, again, you can continue to offer water to them. Even if they aren't right there, you can just offer it out in your yard and think of them as you're offering it. You can also do things similar to what I suggested before, like donating money to groups that protect trees. Then after a while, when the time feels right, perform a commitment ceremony or ritual like the one I mentioned before, and place bark, leaves, flowers, sticks, twigs from the tree that you're working with on the altar. Or if you aren't able to physically get those things from the kind of tree that you're working with, you can order them online or purchase them at a store. Catholicism is obviously problematic in a lot of ways. However, witches that grew up in the church or grew up in a heavily Catholic culture might still choose to work with saints. And if that's the case for you, you might already have an affinity for a particular saint. They might be willing to be protective of you, or they might be willing to be protective of a particular area of your life, which is more my experience of saints. I only work with a few saints because I didn't grow up Catholic, and I suspect that the saints that I work with were probably local deities or local spirits before they were Christianized into saints. Saints are particularly easy for beginners to work with in witchcraft because there's a lot of information out there about them and their magical abilities. They also may be part of your culture or background, and one of the reasons that saints are so easy for us to work with is because at one point, at least in theory, they were human and could empathize more with our struggles in this life. The way that I've worked with saints is to try and find an image or a painting of them, and I give them their own space away from my other altars on a small shelf. You can also get a 7-day candle that has a picture of the saint on it and set that on the altar. Sometimes there are even prayers that you can use to honor them, printed on the candles that you can read aloud after removing any words that don't resonate for you. And I find that with saints, I don't go through a whole big acceptance or divination process. I just start building a relationship with them and start seeing if they actually help me. To ask a saint for their help, light a candle, make an offering, and make a request. I personally hardly ever buy 7-day candles. I usually just light a tea light or a birthday candle when I make a request of a saint. I just want to say that my background with saints comes from my Celtic ancestry, which looks really different than Catholicism in other parts of the world. Saints are one of the few beings that I actually give red wine to, and for the few that I work with, that is their offering of choice. Saint Bridget, however, seems to just prefer cold water and be fine with that. And that's true, at least for me. Tell me your stories about plants, saints, and animal spirits in the comments if you choose. I have a Patreon promotion that I'm running for the next couple of months, and I'll put a description of that in the description or in the comments below. And as always, I want to thank each of you so much for liking, subscribing, and watching my videos. I really appreciate it. So until next time, stay safe and be well.